The sterile hum of the freighter Zephyra echoed through its dim corridors like a memory that wouldn't let go. Captain Kale Stryn sat in his quarters, hunched over an open datapad, its glow casting shadows across his tired face. A half-drunk cup of synth coffee hovered dangerously near the edge of the desk, forgotten. He hadn't slept much since the negotiation run to Miralith Prime, and not just because of politics. There was a soft padding of bare feet on alloy flooring. He looked up. Standing in the doorway was Nyla. Not human. Not even close. Her skin shimmered like burnished copper, her hair a cascade of silken strands threaded with bioluminescence that pulsed gently in rhythm with her breath. She looked like something out of a dream, or a diplomatic snafu. Captain Stryn, she said, her voice like music filtered through water. Is there something wrong with me? Kale blinked, caught mid-thought. What? No. Of course not. Why would you say that? She stepped further into the room, her feet silent on the alloy. You haven't touched me since I was offered. On Miralith, that signifies rejection. Am I not pleasing to you? He stood so quickly that his chair scraped backward with a metallic screech. Nyla, no. Don't ever think that. You're not some gift. You're not property. She tilted her head slightly, curious. But I was presented to you during the accord ceremony. You accepted. That is the ritual of bonding. I accepted because refusing would have fractured the entire treaty, he said, rubbing a hand across his face. Your council said it was symbolic. They also said you could refuse. You did not. I thought you understood. I didn't know you believed it was binding. She walked over and sat at the edge of his desk, back straight, her glowing hair pooling at her waist. Her voice softened. You gave me quarters. Not a cell. Books. Clothes. Freedom. You even repaired the pressure wound on my back without hesitation. On Miralith, those are duties of a bonded partner. Kale exhaled, long and slow. I was just doing what any decent person would. Her gaze dropped. Then I am confused. He didn't respond, because so was he. It had been 8 standard months since that awkward, ancient ceremony. She had been led to him by robed elders, her slender wrist adorned with a quartz and copper binding loop. He'd argued. Loudly. But the Marillions were unmoving. She is trained, they said. Loyal. Compatible with your kind. It felt archaic, regressive, wrong. But refusing might have torpedoed months of diplomatic work. So he'd accepted her. And then spent every day since trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do next. He hadn't locked her away. Instead, she got a cabin. Autonomy. Access to the ship's translator systems. Even a vote in crew decisions. She was kind. Thoughtful. She once rerouted a venting pipe mid-leak, saving his life. But he had never touched her, physically or emotionally. Not that way. Still, she stayed. That night, Kale sat alone in the galley, listlessly stirring cold protein stew. The dim light hummed overhead, and the quiet was heavy. Then Nyla returned. She wore a formal garment now, traditional to her species. Silver threads wove intricate patterns around her figure, catching the light like flowing mercury. She moved gracefully, like poetry had learned to walk. May I sit? She asked. He nodded. She slid into the booth across from him and folded her hands with care. My people don't understand yours. But I've tried. I've read your archives. Watched your visual stories, soap operas, I think they're called. He gave a faint laugh. So you've seen our worst side, then. And still, she said, I do not understand one thing. You say I am not property. That you did not accept me as mate. But you have not sent me away. You offer warmth. Protection. You share meals and repair systems together. On Miralith, these are sacred gestures. He put the spoon down. Nyla, he began, maybe humans and Marillions just don't see love the same way. She looked down. Then, am I not enough for you? The words hit harder than he expected. Not because of the question itself, but the ache beneath it. She wasn't trying to seduce him. She was trying to understand why the person she trusted most kept her at arm's length. He swallowed. You are more than enough. But I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to take advantage of someone who had no choice. I chose to stay, she said softly. She looked him straight in the eyes, and it was like the hum of the ship dimmed. Marillion bonding may begin with a gift, she said, but it only endures when both accept it within. I have watched you, Kale. I've seen you whisper to broken consoles like they're old friends. I've seen you stop and stare at stars when you thought no one saw. You make small choices, but they build something larger. Her voice wavered, barely audible. I want to be chosen. Silence fell between them, filled only by the gentle hum of the ship and the quiet truth of everything left unsaid. The next morning came quietly, as it always did in space. No sunrises. No birds. Just a shift in the ship's ambient lighting and a subtle chime indicating a new cycle. Kale stood in the cockpit of the Zephyra, hands clasped behind his back as he watched a nearby gas giant swirl in iridescent hues. The ship cruised through the Hecaran Drift, a relatively unpopulated stretch of space dotted with forgotten stations and derelict mining rigs. A route perfect for those who didn't want to be found, or who needed time to think. Behind him, the soft whoosh of a door opened. He didn't turn. You didn't sleep, Nyla said. Neither did you. A pause. Then a quiet shuffle as she moved to his side, her gaze joining his on the churning planet below. They stood like that for a long time, saying nothing, bound by silence that had begun to take the shape of something more than avoidance.
Eventually, he sighed. I keep thinking if I make the wrong move, I'll dishonor you. Cross some line I can't uncross. She tilted her head, luminous strands of hair brushing her shoulder. But in waiting, you cause a different harm. A quieter one. I never asked for this arrangement, he admitted. And I never asked to be given away like an heirloom. Yet here we are. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. We both inherited a ritual neither of us fully believes in. Kale turned to her at last. Then why haven't you left? Her eyes were steady. Because I believe in you. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked away, the guilt knotting in his chest like a tightened cable. They spent the day in quiet tasks. Kale checked engine diagnostics. Nyla recalibrated a faulty moisture recycler. At one point, they crossed paths near the supply bay, and she offered him a fresh nutrient bar with a small smile. He accepted it with a nod, barely able to meet her gaze. It was absurd, he thought. They shared the same air, the same living space, the same near-death experiences. But somehow, he still couldn't cross that final emotional threshold. Later, they gathered in the lounge, the only place on the ship with something like a couch. Kale sprawled at one end, boots off, sipping rehydrated tea. Nyla sat opposite, legs tucked under her, reading from a datapad. She glanced up. In one of your human dramas, two characters were bonded without knowing. But they came to love each other anyway. Slowly. He smiled faintly. Sounds convenient. It wasn't, she said. They hurt each other. Often. But eventually, they stopped being afraid of misunderstanding and just asked. He leaned his head back against the seat. Ask me, then. She set the pad down. Why are you afraid of loving me? He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, because I've seen what happens when I love someone. I bury them. Nyla's face softened. She crossed the distance between them and sat beside him, not touching, just near. Then maybe it's time you stop thinking love is a curse you bring with you. He turned toward her, and for the first time in months, he didn't mask the pain in his eyes. You deserve someone whole. I don't need you to be whole, she said. I just need you to be present. That night, Cale found himself staring at the tiny pendant he kept tucked in his jacket. It was nothing extravagant, just two entwined comets carved from mirrored crystal. Something he'd picked up at a market station weeks ago and never found the courage to give. Until now. The next morning, they docked at Station Orelon, a rusting outpost hovering like a relic above a dying moon. Cale volunteered to handle the cargo transfer himself. Nyla didn't argue. She simply watched him go, a flicker of concern ghosting across her features. The station was almost deserted. A few old traders and transient engineers wandered through the corridors, but no one gave him a second glance. At one vendor's stall, Cale paused. There, among cheap trinkets and faded maps, lay a collection of Marillion crystalwork. The designs were ancient and unmistakably cultural. One, in particular, caught his eye, a pendant of twin stars orbiting each other, forever intertwined. The vendor, a Marillion elder with soft gray markings, looked up as he examined it. For a bonded one? She asked. Cale hesitated. Something like that. He paid quietly and slipped the piece into his pocket. The return trip felt longer than it should have. Each step back toward the Zephyr was like wading through unresolved emotion. He wasn't sure what he would say, or if he'd even have the courage to say anything at all. When he stepped aboard, the ship was quiet. Lights dimmed. No sign of Nyla. Then he saw her near the observation window, silhouetted by starlight. She wore one of her ceremonial robes again, though more understated than before. Her hair glowed faintly, catching the reflections of distant suns. I thought you might not return, she said without turning. I nearly didn't, he admitted. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of what it would mean if I admitted how much I care. She turned slowly. Then stopped speaking like a captain. He moved closer. His pulse pounded. When he stood before her, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the pendant. If I asked you to be with me, not out of ritual or duty, but because I choose you, what would you say? She smiled then. Not with triumph, but with profound, quiet relief. I would say, finally. Cale didn't sleep that night, though he lay beside her. He didn't need to. His thoughts buzzed with a strange mixture of calm and fear, like the stillness before a storm that might never come. Nyla lay curled at his side, not because she had been given, not because she had been trained, but because she wanted to be there. That difference made all the difference. The Zephyr glided silently through the drift, stars outside its hull moving like distant sparks scattered in cold ink. Cale watched them through the observation window, trying to comprehend how something so vast and chaotic could make him feel peaceful. Morning, or its artificial equivalent, brought quiet routines. Cale brewed real coffee, expensive, rare, and completely impractical for space travel. But he did it anyway, grinding the beans by hand, enjoying the resistance. Nyla joined him, drawn by the rich aroma. You're using your rations, she noted. I am. He poured 2 cups. This seemed like the right time to waste something precious. She took her cup without a word and leaned against the wall, sipping slowly. He watched her carefully. Do you regret it? Saying yes. She tilted her head. I regret many things. Being handed to you like an object. Not speaking sooner. But choosing you? No. He smiled and looked away, uncertain how to respond. That day, they docked at a smaller relay station, Holland's Anchor. A refueling point, little more than a floating junction box strapped together with rust and forgotten protocol. Cale disembarked alone, mostly out of habit, mostly because he needed space to think. The station was nearly empty, save for a few maintenance bots and a repair technician who didn't even look up from his tablet. Kale wandered aimlessly, letting his mind drift. The pendant still rested in Nyla's hands back aboard the ship, but its absence in his pocket felt heavier than its presence ever had. He paused at a viewport and stared into the distance. There were no words for how much things had shifted. The ship felt different now. Alive in a way it hadn't in years. He returned to the Zephyr to find Nyla in the engine bay, kneeling beside an open access panel. She looked up when he entered. "I couldn't sleep," she said simply. "So I thought I'd fix the coolant delay you've been ignoring." He raised an eyebrow. "You think I ignored it?" "I think you were hoping someone else would fix it before you had to," she replied with a faint smile. He walked over, crouched beside her. "I like having you here." "I know." "No," he corrected himself. "I mean, I want you here. Not as a diplomat's token. Not as part of a cultural misunderstanding. Just, you." She turned toward him, golden eyes unreadable. "Then stop waiting for someone to tell you it's allowed." That night, they sat on the floor of the observation deck with a blanket thrown around their shoulders. Nyla rested against him, not speaking. Her breathing was slow, her heartbeat steady. Kale let the silence stretch. "Why did you stay?" he asked at last. "Even after I gave you nothing back." "You gave me safety," she said. "You gave me space. You gave me time. My people consider those sacred gifts." He looked down at her. "You say that like it was more than I deserved." "Maybe it was," she replied, smiling softly. "But we don't always get what we deserve. Sometimes, we get what we need." Kale reached into his pocket, his other pocket, the one where he'd tucked something else. A new trinket from Holland's Anchor. Smaller. Simpler. A Marillion charm shaped like a single star encased in a loop of silver. He didn't say anything as he placed it in her hand. Nyla studied it. "Another token?" He shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just something that reminds me of you." She turned the charm over in her fingers, then leaned forward and kissed him. Not deeply. Not urgently. Just, firmly. A choice sealed with presence. When they parted, her eyes searched his. "I have no interest in being your obligation, Kale." "You never were," he said. "That was my mistake. Not yours." Her fingers slipped through his. "Then let us make a new ritual. Just ours." In the days that followed, nothing radical changed on the outside. They still ran supply routes, navigated ancient systems, patched crumbling wires and rebalanced fuel equations. But inside the Zephyr, something had shifted. They shared meals more often, sat across from each other with no pretense. They argued, sometimes, about protocols or navigation routes, but now the arguments ended in laughter or a kiss, not silence. Kale caught himself watching her at odd times, when she laughed, when she worked, when she leaned over the console to inspect something he couldn't identify. There was grace in her precision. Warmth in her curiosity. One night, she found him pacing near the engine core, muttering to himself as he recalculated mass ratios. She didn't interrupt. Just stood there with a mug of tea until he turned, startled. He took it from her with a grateful nod. "How do you always know when I need that?" She lifted one shoulder in a graceful shrug. "Maybe I just choose to notice." They stood like that, tea between them, stars outside, engines thrumming steadily beneath their feet. The universe spun around them in silence, uncaring and infinite. But in that moment, Zephyr felt like the only place Kale needed to be. And Nyla, the only person who made sense inside it. The third cycle after Holland's Anchor passed without incident. The Zephyr traveled steadily through the outskirts of the Kalan Verge, a region known more for ghost signals and unregistered traders than for any real traffic. Kale preferred it that way, quiet, untethered, no need for constant explanation. He and Nyla had fallen into a rhythm. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even particularly eventful. But it was real. She moved with a grace that no longer felt foreign to him. He no longer hesitated when their hands touched, no longer glanced away when her gaze lingered too long. In return, Nyla softened too, her tone more playful, her expressions less cautious, her silence no longer burdened by uncertainty. In the small hours, they'd talk. Not about politics or ancient rites or even the implications of their bond. They talked about music. Terrible human music and its strange fascination with heartbreak. About the weird comfort of old Earth sitcoms. About the Marillion belief that stars were the souls of the unborn, waiting to fall into form. "I like that idea," Kale had said once, his voice low. Nyla had smiled. "That somewhere out there, a soul is waiting just to become you?" "No," he said, squeezing her hand. "That we might be made of something meant to shine." The next stop on their route was Virith Station, a bustling repair hub wedged into the spine of a dying asteroid. Kale wasn't eager for crowds, but he needed parts, real ones, not just the jury-rigged solutions he'd been relying on. "I'll go with you," Nyla said as they prepped the cargo manifest. "You sure?" he asked, half surprised. She nodded. "If I'm your partner, let me act like one." He grinned. "Just don't start a fight with any of the traitors." She arched a brow. "No promises." The station buzzed with noise and movement, technicians shouting over engines, automated loaders clanking across gantries, music bleeding from open berths. Nyla drew glances as they walked, not because of scandal, but because she stood out, her skin aglow, her presence commanding. Kale didn't flinch under the stairs. He was done hiding. They found the part, bartered it down, and even picked up a few luxuries: fresh fruit, a spool of woven synth cloth, and a ridiculous neon pin shaped like a smiling planet. Nyla pinned it to his chest when he wasn't looking. When he noticed, she just said, "For luck." On their way back, they passed a makeshift chapel, nothing formal, just candles and crystals arranged in a circle near an old docking node. Marillion, by the look of it. The symmetry of the stones caught Nyla's eye. She paused. "That symbol in the center, it's for mutual choice." Kale tilted his head. "Looks like a pair of orbiting moons. It means unity by free will. We use it when bonds are renewed, not initiated. Like a vow." She nodded. "But one made willingly, not through ceremony." He stared at the symbol for a long moment. "Let's do it." Her eyes widened slightly. "Kale. No guests. No politics. No elders with scrolls. Just us. Right here." She hesitated, then stepped into the circle. Her fingers brushed his as he followed. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They just stood, eyes locked, hearts thudding in tandem. After a few moments, Nyla whispered, "If I had met you without all the confusion, I think I still would have fallen for you." He smiled. "Then I guess we both got lucky, even in all this mess." Later that night aboard the Zephyra, Kale pulled the pendant from its resting place and finally fastened it around her neck. It fit perfectly, resting just above her collarbone, catching the light like twin stars bound in dance. "I know you never needed this," he said, fingers brushing her skin. "But I needed to give it." She placed a hand over his. "Then I accept." They stood together beneath the observation dome, stars spread out before them like an infinite sea of chances neither of them had asked for, but had taken anyway. No vows. No kiss. Just the quiet knowing that they had chosen each other, day by day, moment by moment. Later, lying beside him in the warm hush of the quarters, Nyla whispered, "Do you still fear hurting me?" He turned, brushing a loose strand of glowing hair from her face. "I think I'll always fear that. But you came back." "I did. And I stayed," she said, her eyes soft. He nodded. I know. Her head nestled against his chest, and her voice came as soft as breath. Then we've already won. No contracts. No obligation. Just two people in a sea of stars, building something from broken rituals, mismatched cultures, and stubborn hope. They didn't need to understand every piece of each other. They just needed to stay. So what was this really all about? Not treaties. Not traditions. Not some interstellar soap opera dressed up in glowing hair and crystal charms. At its core, this was a story about two beings from wildly different worlds who slowly, carefully, bravely chose each other, not out of obligation, but because it felt right. Kale and Nyla didn't fall in love the way stories usually go. There was no explosive kiss at sunset, no orchestral swell of music, no convenient destiny. Instead, they built it the hard way, through trust. Through listening. Through the smallest daily acts of care, sharing coffee, fixing broken coolant valves, watching stars together in quiet awe. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a dramatic gesture or a grand claim, but the stubborn, repeated decision to stay. To understand. To try, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. In the end, Kale didn't need a ceremony to prove his feelings. And Nyla didn't need to be accepted because of tradition. They just needed to be seen. Fully. Completely. And chosen anyway. So wherever you are, human, Marillion, or somewhere in between, remember, love doesn't always arrive with clarity. Sometimes, it's wrapped in confusion, doubt, and mismatched customs. But if it's real, you'll feel it in the quiet. If you enjoyed this story, please consider giving it a thumbs up, leaving a comment below, and sharing it with someone who might need a little warmth in their corner of the galaxy. And don't forget to subscribe for more sci-fi love, misadventures, and starbound storytelling. Until next time, keep looking up.